Imagine being told that the killer of someone you loved was going to prison, but you'll never know exactly how they died. That's what happened to the family of Christy Johnson, a young woman whose life was cut short right here in L.A. Her killer made a chilling deal to avoid revealing the full truth. Today we're diving into the courtroom drama surrounding Victor Paleologus, a man with a disturbing pattern of deception and violence against women. We'll hear from women who narrowly escaped his clutches, and we'll uncover the legal maneuvering that led to his conviction, but left some agonizing questions unanswered.
This case is really one of those that shows how the pursuit of justice sometimes take those unexpected turns. We've got court transcripts, interviews with key players, and even a recording of Paleologus himself from prison. So together we'll try to answer those questions. How did the prosecution build a case without that hard evidence? Was justice really served? And what does it mean to accept responsibility without revealing the details of a crime?
Let's start by understanding Victor Paleologus. The sources paint a pretty disturbing picture of a man with a long history of not only financial crimes and using fake identities, but also this very specific pattern of manipulating women.
You're absolutely right. Paleologus would approach women, often at malls, with this enticing offer of an audition for a Bond film. It was always a Bond film, which is kind of interesting in itself, right? Almost like a script he was following.
Yeah, that classic Hollywood lure, sure. But it gets a lot creepier. Every single time he insisted on a specific outfit, a black miniskirt,
Yeah.
a white top, high heels. And the auditions were always in these secluded locations.
Right.
Anyone hearing that today would see like giant red flags waving, right?
Absolutely. And the sources detail several women who encountered Paleologus, and their stories add this chilling layer of detail to this pattern. One woman testified that she was nearly raped by Paleologus back in 1998. He lured her to an audition with that same Bond film pitch and that same outfit request. Now, he was convicted of felony assault for that incident, but it seemed like the experience didn't deter him from continuing this predatory behavior.
It's terrifying that he continued. The case files mentioned a woman named Kathy, who had this incredible intuition to bring a stuntman friend with her to her supposed audition with Paleologus. Now, Paleologus, of course, never showed up. But Kathy later said that she carried this guilt for years because she didn't report him to the police back then. It makes you think about how many other women might have been harmed if she hadn't trusted her gut.
That's a great point. And it really underscores how these kinds of predators rely on their victim silence and their fear. There's another account in the source material, a woman named Susan who testified that she genuinely believed that Paleologus was just awkward or maybe even just trying to get women into compromising situations for a laugh. It speaks to his manipulative nature that he could convince some people that his intentions were harmless, even when those warning signs were so obvious.
It's almost unbelievable. And all of this becomes even more unsettling when we consider how Christy Johnson's disappearance fits into this pattern. I understand she vanished in 2003, and her roommate testified that she'd met a man at the mall. You guessed it. Same Bond film audition, same outfit request.
Exactly. The pattern was undeniable. But here's the thing. There was absolutely no physical evidence connecting Paleologus to Christie. No DNA. No witnesses to an abduction. Nothing.
So how did the prosecution even begin to build a case? That must have been an enormous challenge.
It was. And this is where the prosecutor's strategy gets really interesting. Without that hard evidence, they decided to focus on presenting a pattern of behavior. They used the testimonies of all of these women who had encountered Paleologus, women who had experienced his manipulation. And these specific tactics, it was like connecting the dots.
Right.
Each woman's story on its own might not have been enough for a conviction.
Right. But you weave those individual experiences together,
Yeah.
and suddenly you see a very clear picture of a predator with a very consistent, very disturbing modus operandi. It was a risky strategy, though, wasn't it? Relying so heavily on witness testimony when there's no physical evidence.
It was absolutely risky. The defense attorneys fought hard to discredit the women's stories, arguing that their memories were unreliable, that their experiences with Paleologus were irrelevant to Christie's disappearance. But the prosecution hammered home this point. The similarities in his approaches weren't just coincidences. They were like the signature of a predator who carefully planned his attacks.
And in the end, this strategy worked. Think about the courage that it must have taken for these women to take the stand, knowing that they might be disbelieved, knowing that they would have to relive these traumatic experiences in such a public setting.
Their bravery was truly remarkable. They endured intense scrutiny from the defense, but their testimonies painted such a compelling and consistent picture that the jury couldn't ignore it. Their collective voice was instrumental in holding Paleologus accountable. It was a major victory. but it came with an unexpected twist.
I've got to hear about this twist. Did the defense pull something?
Not exactly. It was the prosecution that offered a deal, and it's one that raises some really complex questions
Yeah.
about what it actually means to achieve justice. Paleologus agreed to plead guilty to murder in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was given a 25 to life sentence.
So a guaranteed conviction.
Yeah.
But at what cost? Didn't the sources say he never offered any specifics about the crime itself?
That's the heart of the matter. He refused to provide any details about Christie's death. He accepted responsibility for the murder without ever revealing what happened to her, where her body was, any of it. It was a frustrating resolution for everyone involved, but especially for Christie's family.
That must have been incredibly difficult for them, to know that the man who killed their daughter was going to prison, but to still be left without a complete understanding of what happened to her. It sounds like a very bittersweet victory.
It was. Christie's mother said that she was relieved, that Paleologus was incarcerated, but she still grappled with the lack of closure. It makes you wonder, if justice can truly be served without knowing the full truth of a crime, how do you heal from such a loss when so many questions remain unanswered?
That's a really profound question. But on the other hand, imagine the impact of all of these women taking a stand, sharing their experiences, and ultimately playing such a crucial role in taking a dangerous predator off the streets. That must have given them some sense of vindication.
It did. Many of the women expressed a sense of relief that their collective action had protected others from potentially becoming Paleologus's victims. It really highlights the power of shared experiences, the strength that can come from women supporting each other and refusing to be silenced.
Absolutely. But it also reminds us of the complexities of the legal system, where justice doesn't always come in a neat little package.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, this story doesn't end with the plea deal,
Yeah.
does it? There are more twists to come.
Oh, there are. And the next one involves Paleologus attempting to undo the very deal that landed him in prison.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. What did he do?
You might think that a plea deal, especially one where the defendant pleads guilty to murder, would be the end of the story. But remember, Paleologus agreed to a 25 to life sentence, not a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
Right, I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
So years go by and eventually a parole hearing comes up. I'm guessing that's where things get even more complicated.
Exactly. And the women who testified against him started to realize something pretty unsettling as those parole hearings got closer. They understood that their stories, the very foundation of the case against Paleologus, might start to fade from memory over time.
That's a chilling thought. All of their courage, all of their effort to bring him to justice, and it could just disappear.
You got it. Without their voices, without those vivid, detailed accounts of his manipulation and abuse, there was a real chance the parole board wouldn't fully grasp just how dangerous Paleologus really was.
Wow. So they knew they had to do something. They couldn't just sit back and risk him being released back into society, potentially putting other women in danger.
They absolutely refused to let that happen. Driven by a sense of responsibility and a fierce desire to protect others, these women decided to take action. They banded together, forming a united front, and they were determined to make sure the parole board understood the true scope of Paleologus's crimes and the very real risk he posed if he were to be released.
It's incredible to think about their strength and solidarity facing this threat years after the trial. What did they actually do to prepare for the parole hearings?
They went back to the source material, their own experiences. They meticulously reviewed their statements, preparing to share their stories again, reminding everyone why Paleologus belonged behind bars. It was a daunting task revisiting those traumatic memories, but they were unwavering in their commitment to justice.
These women are incredible. Did their efforts make a difference? Was the parole board receptive to what they had to say?
Their impact was undeniable. Their powerful testimonies, coupled with a documentary that was made about the case, really brought the details back to life for the parole board. They saw firsthand the lasting impact of Paleologus's actions and the very real threat he posed.
So justice prevailed. Paleologus stayed in prison.
He did. Because of those women stepping up and refusing to let their stories be forgotten, the parole board denied his request for release, likely preventing him from harming countless others. It's a powerful testament to the importance of perseverance and the impact a collective voice can have on the justice system.
It's almost like they had to fight for justice twice, once in the courtroom, and then again years later when Paleologus had a chance to be released. But I'm curious, did they anticipate that? Back during the trial, did they realize that their fight might not end with the guilty verdict?
It's hard to say for sure what they envisioned back then, but what's undeniably clear is that these women went above and beyond what anyone could have expected. They didn't just testify and move on, they dedicated themselves to ensuring that justice was served not just in the courtroom, but in the long term as well.
It's a story of strength, courage, and resilience.
Hmm.
It makes you think about the responsibility we all have to speak out against injustice, to support survivors, and to ensure that those who harm others are held accountable.
Absolutely. Their story underscores that vital point. But there's another layer to this case that I think we need to explore the role of the plea deal itself. We talked earlier about the bittersweet victory for Christie's family, that feeling of justice being served without having all the answers. But the plea deal also raises some really interesting questions about the legal strategy behind it.
Right. I mean, you mentioned that earlier. The prosecution went into this case without any physical evidence, so why offer a deal? Wouldn't they have been more motivated to push for a trial, hoping for a conviction that might force Paleologus to reveal more details about Christie's death?
That's a great question, and it's one that legal experts debated extensively at the time. There are a few key points to consider here. First, even without physical evidence, the prosecution had built a very strong case based on the pattern of behavior that the women's testimony so clearly illustrated. It's possible they were confident enough in that strategy to secure a conviction at trial, but trials are always unpredictable. Juries can be swayed by unexpected arguments, and there's always the risk of a hung jury or even an acquittal. A plea deal, on the other hand, offered a guaranteed conviction certainty that Paleologus would be held accountable for murder, even if the details remained shrouded in secrecy.
I see. So it's a calculated risk, right?
Yes.
Weighing the desire for a full account of the crime against the certainty of a conviction.
Exactly. And you have to remember the context of this case. This happened in Los Angeles, a city where high-profile murder trials often draw intense media scrutiny and public pressure for a swift resolution. The prosecution may have felt that a plea deal, even with the concessions, was the most expedient way to achieve justice and bring closure to a grieving family.
Right. It's a complex decision, and there's no easy answer. But it definitely raises questions about the nature of justice itself. If a perpetrator accepts responsibility without revealing the details of their crime, does that truly constitute accountability?
That's a question we'll keep grappling with as we move forward. But remember, this entire case rests on Victor Paleologus's word. He pleaded guilty, admitted to murder, and then just as quickly he tried to take it all back.
Wait, what? He tried to undo the plea deal. When did this happen?
It happened on the day of his sentencing, just when everyone thought, the case was closed. Paleologus threw a curveball. He submitted this 11-page handwritten letter to the judge, Robert Perry, attempting to withdraw his guilty plea.
Hold on. After admitting to murder, he tried to back out. What was his reasoning?
His letter was this mix of accusations and claims. He accused his lawyer of pressuring him into the plea deal, said he was sleep-deprived, and claimed he wasn't given enough time to prepare a proper defense. He even went so far as to say he was coerced into confessing.
So basically throwing his own lawyer under the bus in a last-ditch effort to escape consequences.
It certainly appeared that way, but Judge Perry wasn't buying it. He swiftly rejected Paleologus's motion, seeing it for what it was, a desperate attempt to manipulate the system once again.
What about Christie's family? Were they given a chance to speak at the sentencing?
They were. Both Christie's father and mother delivered these incredibly powerful victim impact statements.
Wow.
Her father, grappling with this unimaginable grief, urged Paleologus to seek redemption, to find some semblance of peace through faith. Christie's mother spoke about the immense pain of losing her daughter and emphasized the responsibility of the justice system to keep Paleologus incarcerated to prevent him from causing further harm.
It must have been an incredibly emotional moment in the courtroom. How did Paleologus react to their statements?
Throughout their deeply personal, heart-wrenching statements, Paleologus remained silent. He offered no apologies, no expressions of remorse, no explanations. He clung to the denials in his letter, refusing to provide any details about Christie's fate beyond those flimsy accusations against his lawyer.
It's almost as if accepting responsibility, even in that limited way, was just too much for him, as though admitting to any specifics would shatter this carefully constructed facade he'd built around himself.
That's an insightful observation, and it really gets to the heart of who Paleologus is, doesn't it? A con man, a manipulator. Even when faced with the consequences of his actions, he couldn't let go of that need for control, that desire to dictate the narrative.
So the judge sentenced him to the agreed-upon 25 years to life.
Yeah.
Paleologus ends up in prison, but with this cloud of denial still hanging over him, still refusing to answer the questions that haunted Christie's family. Did anyone try to get through to him to get him to tell the truth?
You did. The journalist Keith Morrison interviewed Paleologus in prison, and the transcript of that conversation is fascinating. Even after pleading guilty, he continued to deny ever meeting Christy Johnson, denied inviting her to an audition, denied killing her, denied everything.
Unbelievable. After a guilty plea, after all of this, he still insisted on his innocence. Did he offer any explanation for why he pled guilty in the first place?
He claimed he had no choice, that it was the only way to get the plea deal and avoid the death penalty. He even went so far as to call the entire legal process a formality, reducing a murder trial and a guilty plea to a mere transaction. He even said that taking responsibility in his mind was just a lie, a necessary part of playing the system.
It's chilling to hear him talk about such a serious crime in such a detached, almost cynical way.
Yeah.
Was there any sense of remorse, any indication that he understood the gravity of his actions and the devastation he caused?
None whatsoever. He seemed more concerned with painting himself as a victim of the legal system of his own lawyer of circumstance. He even said he wanted the trial to continue because he believed his lawyer could have disproven the prosecution's case even though he'd already admitted his guilt.
It sounds like trying to have a rational conversation with him was like talking to a brick wall.
Yeah.
Did you come away from that interview with any sense of closure, any feeling that the truth might eventually come out?
Honestly, no. He contradicted himself, shifted blame, and denied any involvement even after pleading guilty. It was a frustrating exercise in futility.
This deep dive has been an emotional roller coaster. We've seen the devastating consequences of Paleologos' actions, the courage of the women who spoke out against him, and the legal complexities of a case built on patterns of behavior rather than physical evidence. We've explored that agonizing compromise of a plea deal that secured a conviction but left crucial questions unanswered. And we've witnessed that frustrating reality of a convicted murderer who continues to manipulate, deny, and evade true accountability.
And it leaves us with a lingering question if justice can be served without the full truth being revealed. How does that impact the healing process for the victim's family and for the survivors? How do we as a society grapple with the moral and ethical complexities of cases like this?
It's a question that doesn't have easy answers, but I think this case, as difficult as it is, reminds us of the importance of listening to and believing survivors, of understanding the power of shared experiences, and of acknowledging the long-lasting impact of trauma and abuse.
It also highlights the critical role of journalists and storytellers in bringing these issues to light, in exploring the nuances of the justice system, and in ensuring that the voices of those affected by crime continue to be heard.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. If you're as captivated by these real-life stories and complex discussions as we are, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking the truth wherever it may lead.